Celtics Beat is brought to you by Prizepicks.
Hey everybody, welcome in. Brand new edition of Celtics Beat. Great to have you here with us on this Friday as we record who knows what day as you listen, but either way, we are thankful that you've consumed the content, be it in video form on the CLNS YouTube page, specifically the Celtics All Access page, or of course in podcast form, Spotify, Pandora, Apple, wherever you find us. We thank you for subscribing. Leave a comment, rate, review, all that good stuff. I am Adam Kaufman. Evan Valenti is always here as well. Our special guest today from the Action Network, friend of the program, and a guy who tweets more about the NBA than anyone you have ever met. Of course, Matt Moore of the Action Network. He is on Twitter at HP Basketball. Matt, welcome back, man. How are you?
Doing well, man. How are y'all doing?
Good. I mean, we're going to get on obviously some Celtics offseason stuff and some bigger picture NBA things. I didn't necessarily envision, because again, I think this is pertinent to tell our audience, this being a Friday, I didn't necessarily expect us in the wake of game one of the NBA Finals to start talking about that game. But what a game that what it was. I don't think we have a choice to at least reflect upon it at least a little bit. The Indiana Pacers, for anyone that missed this fun stat, led that game by a grand total of 0.3 seconds, less than 1 second, and won that game, courtesy of, I know that Jalen Brunson is technically the NBA's clutch player of the year, but find me a more clutch player right now than Tyrese Haliburton. That winner, great look, just inside the three-point line on the wing, and able to rally his team back from down 15 once again in a game that just, really by all accounts should have been over much earlier. When you consider that Indiana turned the ball over upwards of 20 times in the opening half, and even still was never out of the realm of winning this game. And I think a lot of us, Matt, believed the Thunder ultimately are going to be the Thunder. They were playing such great lockdown defense, especially, but there was a little bit of concern as the game went on that, man, they're still not shooting well. They're still not shooting well. And then we see them fail to score at all in the final couple minutes of regulation. And that was just enough for Haliburton and the Pacers to come back, win that game, and do what I didn't necessarily expect, which was make this a series. I had OKC in 5, maybe 6 going in, and now 6 is actually feeling like that magic number. What did you think out of what we saw at game one of the NBA Finals?
Yeah, I was with you on Thunder in 5. I was like, well, I think it's probably a sweep's more likely than 6. And whoops, unless the Pacers go the other direction. I thought it was interesting because on the surface, it's like, what a wild comeback. But okay, that's probably an outlier kind of position. The more you go back and you kind of dig into the details, I think the more promising this is for Indiana, because Indiana, the big thing here was that the Thunder have a big margin for error because of how good they are. And then they also dominate in the margins. And what Indiana did was they removed all of those margins. Okay, they turned the ball over. But the Pacers only allow in this game one they allow 11 points off of those 25 turnovers. 11 points off 25 turnovers. On live pushing, like pushing the ball in transition off of a turnover, they allowed 0.64 points per possession. OKC didn't benefit from all those turnovers that they created. That's why the game was always like, right. How is this close? It was empty possession and on turnover for Indiana, empty possession for OKC, not being able to take advantage of it. They kept the game in terms of the rebound advantage for OKC, which has been a problem for Indiana. They came out ahead in that category. They were within all this range, and they made it into a, hey, who can hit shots? Who can execute in the half court? And their half-court defense, I thought, was the most underrated part of the series coming in. And it really showed up, I thought, especially in that second half, where they were like, look, we're going to give Shea a runway. And he's going to make some great layups. But what he's not going to do is he's not going to generate assists. We're not letting anybody else get loose. It's going to have to be Shea carrying them, scoring every bucket. And Shea made a lot of great buckets, and that kept them ahead for a while. But that combined with, I thought, Mark Daigneault's absolutely just criminal management of the starting unit and the in-game rotations and how he managed those things, and especially going to no center late, all those opened the door. And this Pacers team, the best thing about them is they play when they are down 10 the same way that they play when they are up 1. They play with the same level of physicality, intensity, and intentionality of getting into their sets and executing. And the more this game went on, you could tell the Pacers felt like it was more their game. And once that happened, OKC got really uncomfortable And then you saw the unraveling, which led to the upset.
As someone who owns a ticket both on Pacers in 6 and Pacers in 7, I was thrilled with the outcome last night. We've all been watching a lot of basketball for a long time. I always think back to Game 1, Cavs, Warriors, where LeBron played probably the best game I've ever seen in my life and still lost. Someone who knew that you weren't going to beat that Warriors team if you didn't steal Game 1. That was a huge, huge win. And I think primarily, again, Matt, you bring a lot of great points up. Rebounding, controlling the glass was a huge, huge part of this whole thing. I think what Pacers were plus like 15, 16 in that particular regard. And when you can control the glass, as Celtics fans, we watched them lose to a Knicks team because the Knicks ate them alive, both on the offensive glass and on the defensive glass. It's just Boston could not control tempo of the game. And one of the things as I sat there sitting and looking at things, I'm like, I know it's only a 6-point game, but I kind of feel like this game's being played at the pace Indiana wants to play it at. Yeah. And because they could control the glass in the second half, as you notice, that's when they started kind of chip away at it, made life very easy for them. In that last possession, Shea misses. It's a gang rebound. The ball's up in the air, and Indiana comes down with it. And the one thing I love is everybody knows get the ball to Haliburton. Haliburton knows I got to push pace. Realize he's got Casey Wallace. And Casey Wallace is a good defender. I'm not saying that he's not. But of all the guys that you could have chosen around him, Lou Dort, Shea, and Alex Caruso on the right side of the floor, on the far side of the floor, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to pick on Casey Wallace. I'm going to definitely pick on that guy. And it's a magical run. I think as we move in this show, we'll talk about how the finals is shaping kind of what Boston can do. But this Indiana team is relentless. And Rick Carlisle showing everybody that, like, look, coaching really does matter and play style really does matter. And yet, you have a team on the other side that's amazing and all world and maybe one of the best regular season teams I've ever seen. But every single possession matters. And I think Indiana might know that better than anybody else. And so going forward, you're trying to build teams and trying to get things to fall in place. I just feel like Indiana has the best understanding of who they are and what players they need to be successful. And if you're going to do team building stuff, that's maybe the biggest lesson I take from this, Matt. Is there anything bigger than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I always come back to from a team building perspective. There's two things I think that Indiana has done really well. One is they've built skill with size. These guys it really showed up where when the Thunder were playing small in that game, and again, criminal by Mark Dagnall, you have these bigs, for the love of God, man, play them. But like they look huge. It's Obi Toppin, it's Pascal Siakam, it's Miles Turner. Like Nembhard's a big guard, Hallie's a big guard, Neesmith's a big wing. Like they have size and skill at all these positions. They play fast, but they're not just like hyper athletic monsters. These guys all can shoot the ball, they all can dribble, they all can drive. That's one part of it, I think, from the component. I think the Celtics have for the most part built a team with a lot of those components in them. But the other thing here I really think is, their trades and their drafting was all built off of buy mid propositions. Don't buy low, buy middle, right? Tyrese Haliburton, good rookie season, but, not breaking the world apart, not setting the world on fire in Sacramento, good player. But they were willing to trade Domantas Sabonis, a value player, a guy with a lot of cachet in the league. They were willing to trade him for that. And that sets them up this way. They're willing to draft Andrew Nembhard, a guy that can do a little bit of everything, who can shoot, who can dribble, who can handle, who can defend, like all these type of things. Took the buy middle, I thought, on Aaron Neesmith, who I really thought was going to have a breakout season with the Celtics and never could quite get into the rotation. And then, he gets with Indiana and he becomes this. So they were able, I think, to really kind of build their things effectively that way. And OKC, on the other hand, one of the things that they've talked about is they wanted guys who were comfortable in a lot of different situations. And I think that played a little bit too much, honestly, into the loss in game one, but it's also been a strength of them is that their guys can play. They were playing on a rebuilding team and they were working on their development. And then they were playing on a team trying to make the playoffs and they were contributing that way. And they were playing on a team that had 68 wins and was a 1 seed and they were contributing there. And all of their guys can do these different types of things. And one of the things I thought the Indiana really did a great job in game one of was they made them one-dimensional. They made the Thunder look like a James Harden team where it's like, well, we're just going to watch Shea dribble around and he's going to break his guy down and everyone's going to wait. And the Pacers, for the most part, were like, yeah, we're going to show help at him and we're going to blitz him a few times, but we're really going to focus on making sure that we're not overcommitting to the paint so we can recover to the outside and contest on threes. And that balance there, I thought, was really smart for how they were able to kind of manage that in this game.
So, man, on the one hand, the previous, Oklahoma City Thunder of finals caliber, obviously led by Durant and Westbrook and company, that group, gets to the NBA Finals, lost in 5, as I recall, despite, obviously all the hype surrounding that team. And it was, boy, here we go. And then obviously they never get back and it all gets pulled apart and everyone moves on, goes their separate ways and bounces from team to team, as we continue to see throughout the end or twilight of these guys' careers. It takes us up to, where we are now. I mean, nearly I don't even know how many years later at this point in time, obviously. And you look at the Thunder and it's like, man, this is the beginning of a dynasty. The next 5-year window, they're going to be year after year after year. And maybe, but then, you look at what happened, obviously, with the Celtics and Tatum going down, and all of a sudden next year's a lost year. The year after that, we'll see who's on the roster and what that looks like in terms of trying to get back to contender status. I bring all of that up because if we remove the bubble and we look at just where we are in time right now and all of the ratings complaints and the matchup complaints and the market size complaints and all of that of Oklahoma City against Indiana, here in this area, and probably the greater, certainly as you get closer to Western Massachusetts or Central Massachusetts, more and more people, I would say, are Thunder fans around here because they're rooting for the local kid. You mentioned Mark Daignault. He's from Leominster, Mass. He's the head coach of the Thunder, and it's like, let's rally around our guy, if you will. But as NBA fans, do you think that we should be more so rooting for the Pacers to win this thing? Because there is that belief that, all right, Oklahoma City's going to be back there. Win or lose, they're going to be back there. Pacers aren't getting back there. It's a good team, but I don't think all of a sudden that this, in my mind, maybe you guys disagree. In my mind, I don't think this is like the beginning of something really special for the Indiana Pacers. I think this has been a great last half of the regular season into the playoffs, and this team is legitimate, but not legitimate enough to where I'm going to annually view them as a contender. I think this is an outlier season for Indiana.
I don't really agree. And the reason I don't agree is, one, they made the conference finals last year. And, Mazzulla's talked about how they were a team that he thought really played them well. And that game 1 outcome was such like a miracle. Boy, did you guys get away with one there,
Sure.
Kind of outcome. And the Pacers are better this year. And Haliburton is only really scratching the surface of what he's capable of. These clutch shots are amazing. But when everyone criticizes him for how he disappears, it's not that he's afraid of the moment or whatever else. It's that Haliburton is a guy that rises all tides. And so he's still learning this balance of, how do I impact at each and every possession without dominating the ball? And Nikola Jokic had to find that balance too. And the way that they play is actually kind of similar. If you look at Jokic's early career before he was like, no, I'm the best player, give me the ball, I will do this. Like, he had to learn that, and he didn't learn it until he was older than Haliburton is now. And so, like, Tyrese is only going to get better, and Nembhard's got time in front of him. Miles Turner's obviously in the middle of his career and kind of in his prime, and Pascal is probably starting to enter his late prime. But they've got a lot of opportunity, I think, to be able to build and still get better. And they have young guys. They've drafted well. I think Ben Shepherd's going to get better. Jarris Walker's going to get better. They have a lot of upside. And especially in an Eastern Conference that's so underwhelming still, I think there's an opportunity. Meanwhile, I'm never going to be like, well, they'll be back. I never do that. Man, we thought that the OKC in 2012, every single article, every tweet was, well, they'll be back. Never got back. Never saw them in the finals again, because fate in this league is cruel. And for me, I think you can root for either team. I think from a purely basketball standpoint, it's always more fun to root for the underdog, right? Pacers are fun, bunch of like lovable nobodies that nobody really knows. I think that's a really fun story. But if you're a fan of the NBA, Sam Presti has been the best general manager in the NBA over the course of 2 decades. And he has done so many things to try and do the right thing always, to try and make the right decisions. And he's had Serge Ibaka's calf injury and Kevin Durant's foot and Russell Westbrook's knee, like all of these things. And then like, all right, KD leaves him in free agency. Builds around Russ, gets Paul George. That team's dangerous. Nope, that doesn't work. Okay, we're still going to make the playoffs with Chris Paul. Then we're going to transition and we're going to try a true rebuild. We are going to let Paul George go where he wants. Bear in mind, like, Sam would have rather, but Sam a Celtics guy, by the way. Sam would have rather kept Paul George. Like, he would have rather had Paul George, but Paul wanted to leave, so he accommodated that request. Russ wanted to leave, so he accommodated that request, and he got good value out of it by managing those relationships and not treating everything adversarially and just kind of being very even-keeled about it. And then he commits to a great rebuilding program. You know, he makes all these great hires of shooting coaches and everything else. He hires internally, and he builds everything up organically. And to me, like, it is so hard to win in this league when you do not have the advantage of the weather's nice here. Like, when you don't have that advantage, or sorry, in some cases, Nico Harrison walks into a coffee shop. Like, you actually have to do the work. And Sam Presti and that organization has done the work at every single level. So to me, there's really no bad winner in this instance. And I think that, you know, either way, I think it's pretty good. But I will not rule out the possibility of the Pacers building something sustainable here. I think it's on the table.
I want to just piggyback off the Haliburton point, because I just think he's playing brilliant basketball right now, and he's giving the game what it needs when it needs it. You know, there was a point in time where I think he understood that Nembhard was the hot hand. He needed to be, you know, let's get him involved. And there are possessions where Nembhard's the top of the key, and Haliburton's just like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to hang out over here in the left. Like, you just do your thing, man. I'm all set. We'll figure this out. But what we need to have you focus on being the primary initiator and getting us in our sets this way. And then at the end, he makes the big shot. So he gets a lot of the credit for it. And I think a lot of people today are doing a good job of trying to allocate proper credit. Like, I'll even go Obi Toppin, who was a disaster for a couple of minutes there, ended up hitting a lot of big threes towards the end of the game. But I bring this up because I bring it back to Jayson Tatum for a minute, because Jayson Tatum's going to have a lot of time to look at things and study things and think. And I've been of the point for years that Jayson Tatum being the quote-unquote point guard of this offense is going to be what brings them to the whatever level they need to be at their max. Like, that's what it's going to be. And you bring up Jokic as an example. I bring up Haliburton as another example. SGA is clearly capable of this. And I think, as you alluded to, Indiana did a great job of being like, hey, we're going to shut that off. And Hallie, you know, and everybody else is going to be focused on primarily making SGA a scorer. And I bring this up only because, again, we're trying to relate it back to the Celtics. Tatum has a little bit of that in him, the ability to get other people involved and be the facilitator and move the ball around. Does he do it all the time? No, but he can do it. We've seen him do it at the highest level. I mean, you go back to 2022, 11 assists in game one. I know they lost the finals that year, but that was sort of the thing I'm looking for. And as you take a 30,000-foot view of this whole thing, you try and apply a Celtics lens to it. I look at this and say, Tatum, if he's sitting there in the offseason, and I know he's going to do a lot of things to try and improve his game, that's the one thing where I think he might not totally get yet. And again, he's still 27 years old, is that there's so much value in rising, like as you said, rising the tide of everyone versus trying to dominate himself. And in certain aspects, yes, teams are playing you that way. But there are ways around that, and I'm not quite sure if Tatum has all the tools in the toolbox to quite get to that point yet. Do you think he has it in him?
Great question. So I thought 2 years ago, Jayson made a huge leap in and what we were talking about here, I've described it as how do you shape the game, right? Because one of the things that I think Haliburton is awesome at is Haliburton will force a switch with a big onto him, and you'll be like, why isn't he cooking him? What's he doing? Why do you just pass off of that? It's because Haliburton knows that guy has to respect his three-point shot, and they don't have the ability to scram that switch, which means if the big is guarding him, he's not down low, which means Nembhard can then attack a defense that doesn't have a supplemental shot defender down low. So they have to play a little bit back to protect the rim, which gets Nembhard more space for him to be able to operate and get, you know, both passes and shots. And Jayson 2 years ago, I thought really did great. And I thought last year he did an awesome job of some of the stuff I've talked about with Haliburton, where he's able to impact the game without needing to shoot or pass or be the primary initiator. Like, I have credited Tatum so much with what he sacrificed in the title year. That dude took slander from everybody because his numbers were down when it was like, this was what was best for the team. It was better for the team for them to operate with Jaylen Brown and Kristaps in DHOs and pick and roll sometimes, because of the gravity that Jayson demanded on the weak side. But this year, I think, took some of this stuff away from him. He was individually brilliant, But because the system, and I've talked a lot about this, that I think Joe Mazzulla went too far into what I refer to as the bit of it started as like, we're an awesome team that's well-rounded and can do all these things. And also, we're always going to make more threes than you and always going to make sure that you don't shoot as many as we do. And then this year, they became, well, we're a team that shoots threes and you don't. And then we do everything to do that. And I think that took away from Jayson a little bit, where it was like, let's, no matter what we got to do, let's force this action with him slip screening so they have to help so we can get a three. Let's ISO Tatum so they have to bring help so we can get a three. And everything that Tatum was doing was honestly, even when he was scoring, was in service of that. And that takes away from his ability to shape the game, because you have to have a menu, right? You have to have cutters and pick and roll bigs and understand all these different ways to create shots for your teammates that aren't so uniform in that approach. And I'm hopeful that I think Tatum, Aaron Gordon, when he got eliminated in 2022 by the Warriors, we asked him, I was like, what are you going to work on? He was like, the mental side. I got to catch up on that. And that's all he did that summer, was he just watched tape. Like, he did his usual conditioning and workout stuff, but it was all breaking down film to seeing how can he impact the game in smarter ways. Now, Tatum's a way better player than AG, but if he's able to take that kind of approach and that's what he focuses on versus Drew Hanlon having him shoot pull-up jumpers, then he's going to have a really good opportunity for him to be able to shape the game, I think, in more meaningful ways. That's the next step for him, even coming off this injury. And that's going to help him with the recovery. That, hey, if you're breaking the game with your mind, you don't have to have that same explosive step. You don't have to have as much faith in your push-off. You don't have to rely on that stuff. You are a great enough basketball player for you to dominate the game without needing to put up 40. That's how good you are and how versatile you are. I think he's got that in him.
We have Matt Moore with us from the Action Network. We're going to take a quick break, tell you about our good friends over at Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. That's 2,000x. Run your game all season long on Prizepicks.
Yeah, join over 10 million users today and sign up. And I've been signed up. Kaufman, you and I have weekly meetings about this thing, about my Prizepicks for the week. And let me tell you, I've had so much fun with Prizepicks this NBA season that I honestly can't even wait till next season. I'm so excited about it because I've actually done decently well with Prizepicks.
Game one of the NBA Finals, you ran hot.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But the reason why I've run so hot, Compton, I talk about this all the time, it is the flex play. Flex play is what – because I can get 2 out of 3. I can't always get 3 out of 3. I was panic texting you last night about how I was getting screwed out of even a 2 out of 3, and then I end up hitting 3 out of 3.
I told you not to lose hope. Still time to sweep the board.
There was. And honestly, Kaufman, thankfully you had me – I had you to talk me off the ladder for that because I had – so CLNS had – for game one, they had a little boost for everybody. And it was Tyrese Haliburton over 13.5 points, which he got with 0.3 left on the clock. He stamped that one, which was really awesome. It made I was screaming on my couch. I was laughing. I was giggling. With sure joy that Haliburton happened to get right over that mark with the last points of the game. I also had Alex Caruso over 6.5 points, which I think he did in like the first half, which was great. And then I went less than on Chet Holmgren rebounds, less than 9. And I'm going to point this out because he had 6 in this game. And if you look at the long-term not forecast, but the last couple of games, the last 5 game log, he hasn't done the last 6 games go over 9 rebounds in a game. And Kaufman, you and I texted earlier today, when we're recording this on a Friday, that the less than more than line was 8.5. Mm-hmm. Folks, if you don't think
I was on under 9.5, by the way, just like you.
Yeah,
independent.
Yeah, so we're on the same page on this.
Yeah, if
it's 8.5, pay attention. That number is a little tricky because he can get to 8. 9 was almost an immediate lock for me. So if you're playing Prizepicks, keep an eye out. Chet Holmgren, more or less than 9 rebounds. I think it's pretty simple. And with flex play, you can either look, if you get all 3, you get 2.5 times, or if there's a special boost, sometimes even 3 times your money. But if you hit 2 out of 3, pending what you pick, because there are goblins and there are things that help you out in terms of a better play out and stuff. Like you get less payout, more payout, just depends. But like normally, if you hit 2 out of 3, you 1.25x your money. So you get more than what you put in back, which is the best part. So you're basically, if you get 2 out of 3 right, you're still winning money. And that's where I'm at. I love winning money, and getting it couldn't be any easier, confident. In less than 15 minutes, the money will roll into your account, buddy. There's something better than that.
Yeah, we're not in this to lose money. You want to win the money. And like you said, easy to get the money. That might be the best part. So, heck, Prizepicks, it uses Venmo. Literally nothing easier. Download the app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after playing your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. The promo code is CLNS. You get $50 instantly after playing your first lineup for only $5. Prizepicks. Run your game. All right, we're back with Matt Moore, and let's keep going with Joe Mazzulla. And there's some various angles of all things Joe Mazzulla that I do want to explore with you, especially as an outsider. I mean, as someone with a national perspective of the Boston Celtics versus a lot of us that get a little jaded, at times bias one way or the other, locally, obviously. But part of that does come back to the bit, if you will, as you referred it to. And Ev, I know you have plenty of thoughts as it relates to the bit, the coaching style of Joe Mazzulla.
Yeah, and it really just primarily gets to like, okay, they won a title last year, so it justifies a little bit of what they're doing, for sure. But then it fails in spectacular fashion against the Knicks, who I think everybody, would admit, like, okay, they play that series 100 times. How many times did the Knicks actually win that series? And here we are. And I say this sort of under the umbrella of, like, as we've seen, especially very recently, like, coaches, I think leashes are getting shorter. I mean, you go back to 2018, Dwayne Casey gets fired. Mike Budenholzer's been fired a few times. Nick Nurse has been fired after winning a title. Tom Thibodeau fired this year. You had Mike Brown fired. Mike Malone's been fired. Taylor Jenkins has been fired. If I'm Joe Mazzulla, and this year, we're going into this year as a reset experimental year, right? Because Tatum's not going to be back for a while. Everybody assumes the Celtics are going to shed salary to get under the second apron so they can do a couple of – I get that. But if I'm Joe Mazzulla, this year is kind of a big year for me personally, because this year needs to be the year we develop some sort of curveball here in a way that, like, when the threes aren't falling, you just don't go, well, the math's the math, so next time the math's going to math, so we're going to be fine. When it comes down to it, sometimes the math doesn't work. We just literally saw it. And what I just saw was, again, we keep bringing the Pacers back into this. I watched the Pacers team struggle to do things all night and find a different way to win, and they did. I'm not quite sure if Boston has that particular element to them at this particular moment. So if you're Joe Mazzulla, Matt, do you feel pressure this year with the current firings that we've had recently, and then the lack of what we call a curveball or just a second pitch or something, to come back to the table and say, yeah, we got to tweak some stuff because this isn't quite working the way I wanted it to.
With the ownership change, I think not being expected to be dramatic here over the next little bit, I think that helps a little bit. I don't think that there's a real pressure on Mazzulla. What I do think is there's probably a need, if he takes like a step back and kind of reevaluates things, to kind of be like, all right, maybe we went a little far. Maybe we went a little far, that there's got to be some balance here with it. Now, maybe he's just like, nope, this is whatever. But here's the thing is, I always go back to this, which is the problem to me was trying to recognize. I heard a lot of Boston media talk about this team this year as like, oh, it's the exact same as last year. And I'm like, no, I watched that team. And that team, if you were not hitting threes, would be like, all right, fine, we're going to buckle down and we're going to play elite defense. And this year it was like, well, if we're not making threes, we're going to shoot some more. And then that's going to be the solution to it. And they need to get back, I think, a little bit to that versatility. Now, some of this is also roster. Like, Al's a little worse because he's a little older. Right. And now, there's a lot of talk about Al being gone. Drew, not as good. Just Drew's getting older. Not as good. Takes a little bit off. if you can, I think the real interesting question here is what's their development plan like? Because they've got some interesting pieces there on the bench, and a lot of guys that even people like me are kind of like, really? Like these are like playoff rotation caliber guys, but they've made it work really consistently. Like, what if Luke Cornett's got another gear to him? What if Taylor Shireman's got a whole other level of development to him? What if Peyton is actually even better than he's shown when he won the 6th Man of the Year? Can Sam Hauser take a step forward here? Can they add guys in the draft or free agency that are like buy low candidates for them to be able, even if they swap out Drew and they get pieces back that are more this buy mid, right? You take a good player that maybe is still a little bit undervalued that you see something in. Can you build that up into another mechanism without just absolutely siloing these guys into 3-point shooters? Can you make them more diverse and interesting offense? And then when you're ready to next year, you can still return to a very, like, I think you should keep the math edge. It's not like that's a bad thing, right? It's about the degree. It's not like I was like, they shoot too many threes. They need to shoot more mid-range jumpers. Well, no, I don't. No. Like, I'm aware of the math. I'm an analytics guy. But when you make yourself so beholden to those concepts, you don't let the game come to you. And one thing we kind of talked about, this is less of a roster build and it's more of an approach thing. One of the things I love about the Pacers so much, they take whatever shot you give them and they can make whatever shot you give them. When teams were preventing them from taking threes, they were like, no problem. We're just going to kill you with the mid-range. Oh, you're going to step out on us. All right, we're going to get to the rim. And then this series, OKC's like, we'll give you threes for days. That's who we are. We're going to give you wide open threes. So guess what? Pacers shoot high volume on 3-point attempts last night, even with that turnover gap. Like, look at that turnover rate and then look at the number of threes that Indiana took last night because they gave them to them. And that shot variety is really important. A lot of the great defenses are always built on the idea of what do you want to allow? We want to take away this and we want to take away this, but we'll live with this thing because it's the NBA and you got to live with this. All right. If you're the Celtics, don't you want to be able to take it where and not try and force it every single time and be like, hey, instead of forcing a tough version of what we do, why don't we take easier stuff that we can generate against this? Now, I think it's fair to question that because it's like, look, the Celtics still left you open. They gave Derek White like 1 million open threes. Like they gave Derek White and Peyton Pritchard 1 million open threes. The Celtics' bigger problem was that the Knicks were like, hey, you can take all the pull-up jumpers you want. And the Celtics, in my opinion, were very much like, that's a 3. It's good. And no. Just work for another 10 seconds and you'll get that Derek White 3 that's a 1.33 points per possession mark. Just work a little harder and you're going to kill them. So getting back to those kind of principles of being more disciplined and focused with your game plan, I think is something that they can take forward next year as well as developing some of that talent.
Going back to one of the points that Ev was making with Mazzulla, though, you know, you said you don't necessarily believe that he feels a lot of pressure, and that's fine. I would tend to agree with that. And I think part of that is the support that he feels very publicly and clearly personally from Brad Stevens in particular in that front office. You know, Ev mentioned a bunch of these guys that have been shown the door in recent months. And I think really there are a couple common denominators there. Longevity, be it multiple opportunities, but I mean longevity coaching in the NBA, one stop or another, or however many they've had. And some of those situations got a little volatile toward the end with maybe a general manager, maybe even an owner. So that's one, you know, two big differences, but the latter being most significant. It seems like Joe Mazzulla is completely on the same page with Brad Stevens and company and goes up to ownership, obviously. So for all the people, and you see it on social media, that want Joe Mazzulla's head after every, you know, key loss during the regular season or postseason loss, most recently, obviously the one they experienced against the Knicks. I mean, how safe do you actually believe that he is? And I believe he should be, and I believe he is, but how safe do you believe he is as someone that isn't, you know, in the day-to-day of the Boston minutia?
He's safe this year. And the question, and it's like, well, they can't fire him after a year in which Jayson Tatum missed the season with a torn Achilles. Come on, they can't fire him then. Can they? Because if they don't like the process, and the biggest thing here is look at Tibbs. It's like, why did Tibbs get fired? It's like, well, they lost in the ECF. No. It's because they have championship expectations. Nope, that's not it either. It's because they walked into a meeting with the players and they walked out with a decision to fire Tom Thibodeau. And for as much as it's like the players love him and they've got their back, a few of those guys in that meeting had to have been like, I just don't know if we're going to get there. And so the important thing here is that Maz has to be able to keep those connections with the players. He has to keep that love and appreciation of them going forward, because those relationships change. I watched it in Denver where, Michael Malone was like, they had such a great relationship between him and Nikola Jokic and him and Jamal Murray. And by the end of the season, like, it was apparent to all of us the week before he got fired that they completely tuned him out. And Nikola Jokic was never asked ever, do you want us to fire Michael Malone? But I will also tell you, and Joker, if asked, would have been like, that's not my decision. That's above my pay grade. But that decision was not made with the idea that Jokic was against it. That subtle difference matters here. So, like, how's his relationship with Jaylen Brown? How's his relationship with the young guys? How's the development curve and all this? I also think there is a real problem that happens after you win a title. I think there's a hubris factor that sets in with some of these guys. And I don't think all of them should have been fired. I don't think Mike Budenholzer should have been fired. I don't think that Taylor Jenkins should have been fired. He didn't win a title. Michael Malone's a little bit of a different situation. There was a toxic atmosphere around the team. But that was in part because of the hubris that Malone brought in after they won the title. Can't tell me nothing. I won a title. Well, you got to keep working and making sure your team's disciplined and not take things for granted. That's a huge part of this, is don't take things for granted. Like, there were little signs that the Celtics had slipped a little bit this year. Not significantly. They could have won the title. Like, shot variance goes differently in that Knicks Celtics series, and we're talking about Celtics Thunder game 1. But there were signs along the way that when you look back, you're like, yeah, they weren't as good. And it takes, I think, a really sharp mind to be able to balance the drain of a title season and what that causes on the team next year, while also making sure that the team is sharp enough in the detail areas to not kind of lose their way. And going into what could be basically a gap year, that's an even bigger challenge. So is it going to surprise me if Mazzulla is fired in 2 years? Not a bit. That's not going to shock me at all. It's not going to shock me if he's fired next year. If it's like we had real intentions to make the playoffs and they did not, that's not fair, but it's also possible because that's how this industry goes. But if you were like, Joe Mazzulla is the coach of the Celtics in 3 years, yes or no? I'd be like, no, probably not, because I've seen this history of it and what's happened with these teams, and especially with the second apron, what that means for team building.
And I'm glad you kind of went in a direction of, like, with Nikola Jokic. He didn't, he didn't advocate for it, but at the same time, like, you go back to that moment where he told Tatum to get up after Tatum was hurt, like on the ground in the middle of just like literally in pain with his wrist. And he told let him to get up. But that was a moment in time. Now look, Mazzulla and Jayson, there is a lot of love there. Like Jayson just talked about how Mazzulla like tells him all the time, "I love you." Like, let's pull him aside, and be like, "I love you, man. Just want to tell you I love you," and like that's it. So there's still a connection there. But Kaufman, I've been kind of throwing this at you in our text messages recently of like, I hope Mazzulla's looking at this and saying, there is something else that we can do. And I'm going to get in the lab and I'm going to come up with some stuff, because I don't think he's infallible. Like, I know he's had a lot of winning. Like, he's won a ton of games. Like what? He's won a ton of games. But at the same time, like, the development stuff matters, like getting the best, and he's gotten the best out of Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser and some of the, like, Luke Cornett and like all these guys. Like, he's gotten the best out of some of these guys. But now it's like, okay, so they're probably going to lose Hauser. If I'm going to be honest, they're probably losing Hauser.
Yeah.
Baylor Shireman is the next guy up. All right, let's see what Baylor Shireman's got. JD Davidson. Look, he was the MVP of the G League. That's awesome. What has he done in the NBA? Absolutely nothing. We look at him. We look at Walsh on the bench, who I like a lot, but what is he? This is going to be year 3 here. Like, what is he doing? And I think Walsh has a real opportunity to make an impact defensively, specifically considering his athleticism and his length. Like, he's just a condor out there. It's unbelievable. So, Kaufman, I've been bugging you because I want you to kind of get on with me here and be like, look, like a middle year of Mazzulla next year, I think it's things start to, like, look at Alex Cora right now in the city of Boston, right?
Sure.
Alex Cora is under fire, under siege, and I can easily see this being Joe Mazzulla next year if stuff doesn't change. And I wanted to be. I was throwing at you all week because I'm prepping myself for this, and I want you to be prepped for it as well.
Yeah, but I think there's an element of like Cora had to get there. There are already Celtics fans that want Joe Mazzulla gone. There are Celtics fans that have been, after a championship, they were still saying they won in spite of Joe. Like they're sitting here longing for Ime Udoka and the good old days of that one singular year when they didn't win a championship. I just think I guess here's where I'll throw it back to you, Matt, is, I think people have heard enough from me. They've heard enough from Ev talking about Mazzulla and look, we're like Ev said, nobody's infallible, but we are members of the fan club. We support Mazzulla. We don't want Mazzulla gone. We think he's the right coach for this team and capable and all of that. But again, as someone that evaluates the entire league and looks at every coach in every situation, do you think, because look, he didn't even finish, I don't think, top 10 in the NBA Coach of the Year vote. Do you feel that there is a proper rating for Mazzulla, overrated, underrated? What is it you think he does well versus the introspection that you alluded to that maybe requires a little bit of work? I mean, how do you currently evaluate Mazzulla?
That's a good question. I think he's probably properly rated because I do think everyone kind of agrees like he's a good coach and he's won a championship and that puts you on a different level. And, if he's past 7, I would probably be like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, that doesn't seem right to me if he's past 7, because honestly, just the willingness to, I'm dead serious. The willingness to embrace the math is a benefit. Like, to be able to be clear eyed enough to just be like, no, there is no way around this. This is going to win more than it's going to lose. If you take more threes and they take fewer threes, you're going to win most times. It is really an infallible argument when we look at it from a steely-eyed perspective. The question is, how do you get there, right? Do you get there through good process or bad process? I think that those that are overly critical of him are hung up on that because they don't like the idea of there being a solve for basketball and B, for that solve to be mechanical, that it's not like flow and feel and it's like real hooper stuff. And that stuff is not wrong. Like, I think that's the hard part is how do you marry flow offense? How do you marry rhythm and the feel of the game into principles that still lead you to efficiency? Because we've seen both extremes fail. If you have like, wow, they just have like a great chemistry and synergy. How many points did they score? 85. And then we've seen like, hey, they have the most efficient, like these are the best shots that you can create. How many points did they score? 90. Like, not enough. And you have to be able to generate those. It's the Rockets missing 28 straight threes versus the Warriors, where, okay, you created open threes, and those are good shots from the perspective of their catch and shoot, but no one touches the ball, and there's no rhythm or motion there. And so balancing those things, I think, is important. And I do think that, again, I kind of go back to the differences to me from my perspective in 24 versus 25. Is that 24, one of the things I said is I was like, look, they faced a lot of teams that were injured, but you cannot deny that this team plays the most unselfish basketball of anybody in the league. Nobody is less selfish than the Celtics. Everybody touches it. The ball's always moving. The ball's always popping. They will always go to the open guy. It is like everybody touches the ball. And this year, it just felt more and more like it was like, all right, so then we're going to force a switch, and then Tatum's or Brown's going to attack, and then they'll bring help, and then we'll kick out, and then we'll get the offensive rebound, and we'll kick out again, and then they'll make the three, and then we'll get back. And it's like you became a little rote and mechanical, and keeping that invention is going to be like an interesting part of this for Mazzulla. I think a good thing for him to do would honestly be to like challenge himself. What do I want to accomplish this year? What you should not do is like survive, just get through this year and like, let's make sure that we still take enough threes. Like if you go in and you're like, I want to accomplish this and this and this. I want our offense to feel this way. And those feelings are very difficult things to kind of to objectively work towards. But if you get there, you're going to feel like, all right, we have a good offense. Our guys did develop. They're better players because they understand the system more. We play unselfishly. We generate good shots. And if you do that, you've accomplished your goal as far as the process and the results or whatever.
Yeah, it's for me. It's like I love Mazzulla ball. I love how he approaches the game. I love how he's willing
killer
to
whale
bring in.
offense.
Well, that's the thing, though. I love that he brings in soccer in his
Yeah.
relationship with Pep Guardiola, and thinking about how killer whales stalk their I love all that stuff because it makes him an outside the box thinker, which I think in this NBA, I mean, we give Eric Spoelstra a ton of credit all the time because it seems like he thinks out of the box constantly. And so I love his ability to think outside the box and bring things from other sports to adapt to basketball. Like one of my favorite quotes is of him, like talking about how soccer, the flow of the game, how shots really created is not actually the action in, that half of the pitch. It's actually stems from this part of it, which actually started with on the defensive side of it and led to all these things. Like he understands flow sometimes, but I do think, as Matt said, they get a little too mechanical and too predictable in what they do. And it's clear that when you watch last year's teams and this year's team, that there was a difference. And I think Matt, hit it on the head with the hubris part of it of like, we're the champs. We'll figure it out. We're just the champs. Who cares? Whereas like the process that they had last year was the secret sauce. Like all the stuff that they would do of the ball humming around and go inside, outside, left, right, and end up in some awesome shot. That stuff wasn't there because I think there was hubris. So Kaufman, as we kind of make this dialogue kind of go back and forth, I do think hubris killed them this year. And I thought as we sit here and say, sometimes that championship experience is what you need to get over the hump. Maybe it killed them. Maybe it killed them this year. Maybe that's the biggest reason why that fails because they actually succeeded last year. And I don't know how many other teams you can say that for, but seems like maybe with this stretch of champions where we have a different one every year, maybe that's it. Maybe that's the one thing that we're not thinking of hubris. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how much of it was there. I guess I look at a couple of different sides. I look at the coaching side, and as you guys have both talked about, the element of, well, we just won a championship playing this way. We can continue to play this way. We don't need to evolve necessarily. We don't need to change. We don't need to do anything differently because, again, water will find its level. The shots are going to fall, yada, yada, yada. And there's the player component of, do you rest on your laurels at all, even subconsciously, like in 2 games at home against the Knicks in a series that if you read your own press clippings, everybody was saying, you're going to kill them. It's not even going to be a series. This is going to be easy. And then, you blink and you blow multiple 20-point leads in games 1 and 2, and you go down on the road 0-2, and suddenly it's, oh, crap. Like turns out this is not easy. And so I don't know if they did that. I don't know if they coached cocky. I don't know if they played lazy. To the eye, there were moments of all of that stuff, but I think everybody can be guilty of it. Certainly, though, for better or worse, their present reality is going to be an automatic reset. It has to be, because all of a sudden, they're not contenders. Short of some, I don't even know what would have to happen this offseason, or Tatum by some medical miracle returning in, March next year and all of a sudden having a potential playoff run in front of him and being even remotely similar to the guy that went down, then we have a conversation. But right now, I just don't see an avenue to where this team is contending for a championship next year. And so it goes back to the whole, as we've been talking about, it's planning for 2 years out. It's planning for 26, 27 and all of that. And if that is the, mindset at that point in time, then you can't, there has to be a mental reset to where if you're Joe, as Matt discussed, you got to do things differently. And then this roster, you're just going to have fresh faces. And Matt, that's where we can kind of, wrap up this conversation before we, close the book on this particular episode. We've been talking about this for multiple weeks now, but I want your perspective in terms of the roster turnover. It's all the same names that we're all going to talk about, obviously, week to week. It's, is Hauser going to be traded just because of what he costs? Is Al going to retire? Is Cornette going to be back, or is he going to get priced out in free agency? Is Holiday going to be moved? Is Porzingis going to be moved, or do they keep him as an expiring, given obviously the health component there? And of course, the biggest one, Jaylen Brown. You're going to entertain calls. You're going to talk about it, but do you have the stones to actually move him to save money when you are bringing back less talent in the long run? And so these are all of the things that Brad Stevens and company are facing. I tell you, I trust in Brad. I think he has earned that in his time as president of basketball operations or whatever the hell his title is. Mike Zarin, all of these guys in that front office, less Austin Ainge, by the way, who's followed Dad to Utah. We haven't discussed that. But what do you expect? What is this roster roughly going to look like when next season opens?
I mean, I think everybody in the league is wondering that. And I think what I will say is I am more confident in their ability to pull off bold moves where you look at it and you go like, oh, that was really smart. And it's like, yeah, they may have gotten a little bit worse on paper, but they got a little bit more versatile, or they got a little bit more options. Sure. They got a little bit of a deeper roster in terms of who they can play night to night and really feel like they can trust if they get to the playoffs. If they reach the playoffs. The Jaylen Brown thing, I think, is a fascinating one for a number of reasons. And that's a really complicated one, I think, not only with the money and those things, but what Jaylen wants for his career. Like that to me is like where you start that conversation. But, I think the other thing I'll say is there are so many teams that are looking that need pathways. They're just like, we got to move this contract. We have to shake up this roster. We need something new. If Boston's willing to do business, if it saves them a little bit of money, those teams are going to be interested in that because of how limited the CBA is. Mm-hmm. And so there's like opportunities there, I think, for Boston to be able to move some of these pieces and get good return. And I also think Brad Stevens is one of the guys I would trust most to be in a position to capitalize on that. So like, I have a lot of confidence. The Boston Celtics are still going to be good next season. Are they going to be as good as this season? No. Are they going to be as good as last season? No. But are they going to be good? Are they going to be interesting? Are they going to be worth watching night to night? I absolutely think so. And the question is, do they enter into a new era where they do kind of one of the things that I think a lot of teams need to do, downgrade for a year to get multiple pieces and then reconsolidate those pieces into the larger acquisitions when you're ready to contend. And they have an opportunity and a window to do that because of Tatum's injury that a lot of teams need. Like Denver desperately needs to do that. They need to take large chunks and break them into smaller ones and then build that value up and then send them back out again. But they can't do that because you're literally wasting a year of Jokic's career. So the Tatum injury is awful and terrible. I'm going to miss watching Tatum night to night. But if you're dealing with that reality, with this CBA, having a window to do this, not the worst thing in the world for them setting up for 2026.
Have any parting thoughts?
No, I said that on Brian Barrett's podcast, actually right after the aftermath of the injury. Like we taped later that night, and I had a cup of tequila in my hand. And at the end of it, I was like, this might be good. This might be a good thing. Because that exact reasoning right there. That's all.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating offseason, and we're really not even at the interesting part yet, honestly. I mean, we're into early June. The NBA Finals, which again looks like it's going to be a series after all, is just underway. But right around the corner, and look, it's not Summer League that I'm sitting here caring about. It's the NBA draft and what dominoes fall on that night. Obviously, the start of free agency and trades that are made around it. I mean, this is a fascinating point on the NBA calendar, and it's not just the Celtics. And we'll get to this in future shows, obviously. But the Knicks, failing obviously in what many thought was a very favorable path, and Tibbs is out the door. So, is Cat going to be moved again? It's not Brunson, but is Towns going to go? Giannis, is he going to go? Is he going somewhere in the East? Does he wind up, aside Wemby in San Antonio? There Durant, where's he going to end up moving? All these different dominoes in terms of, at the very least, name recognition, some toward the end of their careers, but a guy like Giannis very much in his prime. There are a lot of things that can shake up the NBA next year. And as we have talked about quite a bit recently here on Celtics Beat, the CBA, that is what it is now designed to do. It is promoting player movement and these stars jumping around the league more than ever before. And how will that impact the Celtics? And how will Brad pull a Danny and get involved in these conversations when there's an opportunity to do so, as Ainge did for so many years? But Matt, I'm sure we'll bug you again during the offseason, discuss some of this stuff. And, great having you on here. As always, we always enjoy your perspective.
Love doing this pod. You guys are so great. I'm happy to come on anytime. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you. And Ev, we'll clip that. We'll use it to promote. Again, Matt Moore, Action Network. Get him on Twitter at HP Basketball. Again, Dude goes a mile a minute, but in all the best ways. Like there are no tweets wasted. It is all analytical and insightful, and I encourage you to check it out. Not just the initial tweets, but the replies, the conversations. A lot of them are really fun to follow. Check out this show, Celtics Beat, the other C's-themed podcasts and NBA-themed podcasts across the CLNS Media Network. Check out specifically this show on the Celtics All Access page. We appreciate you. Rate, review, subscribe, leave comments. We do read them, for better or worse. We thank you for being here. For Ev, for Matt, I'm Adam. This has been Celtics Beat. We'll talk to you again next week.